we're going to continue. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection?
Okay, so today's reading, I think it's going to really address why there really is no hope for humanity. I mean, I don't mean that in like an absolute way. I mean, I think there is hope is a good thing to have. I don't think the results are always there to match the passion or the fervor of that hope. People from way before our times were well aware of the futility of the human endeavor. I mean, as was it Sartre said, I guess hell is other people. I mean, the opposite can also be true, which would be heaven is, what's the opposite of other? And so I was thinking, like, with this virus, I mean, we have some people protesting on the one hand, saying we want society to reopen because we need to go to the hairdressers. And on the other hand, people who are just like, well, I can stay home and that's cool with me and it's a good thing for society, so let's stay home. My point in saying these things rather facetiously is that I think each point can be deconstructed and there's always like another side to things, and we normally categorize things according to our own point of view, our own affinities, and we're quick to jump to judgments and have prejudice against things. And of course there's stupid people, I think, on all sides of the spectrum. I think even ourselves we're stupid. I know this tie and suit maybe says something quite different, but nevertheless, I mean, I'm like wearing sweatpants. I think this crisis at its core is just bringing to the surface these very difficult, if not impossible, questions. This is all coming from this idea of like, okay, the moment you name something is right after the cusp of the intensity of that thing, and then that thing prepares to disappear. Of everything that disappears, there remains a trace. He constructs this great image of starting with the Cheshire Cat from Lewis Carroll, saying how it's kind of like the cat that disappears, but the grin remains. And then he makes this kind of analogy to the judgment of God, and he sets it up in this really beautiful way where he says, like, a cat grinning is already a terrifying thing, but the grin on its own is even more terrifying. And then he goes to say, the judgment of God is terrifying, but God's judgment without God, and just leaves it. The notion of truth in and of itself has become the question in these times. Earlier I was saying, okay, on the one hand we have people protesting and people around here, people, I don't know, who have the means to, for example, see this video, which is probably like 5 people, as I said, but nevertheless. But even people in your entourage, we haven't been challenged yet to the point where our comfort is truly put into question. There are exceptions here, obviously, and I mean, there's the issue of health and psychological toil, and this is all very valid stuff that we really have to pay serious attention to. But there's just a struggle with groups having different narratives, and one group will perceive the other as being stupid, selfish. Specific cases where it's just like a dance class started upstairs. It's actually quite relaxing for me now. I feel that I can really get to the point and say some good stuff now. And I hope this is enough talking as compared to the last one where I was reading a lot. Now I'm babbling a lot, so second coffee is kicking in, so feeling good about that. Yeah, so I was speaking human conflict. I mean, compassion and communion arise, and these are beautiful things for sure, but just give them enough time and pettiness will erode any semblance of social community, I think. I mean, I know this is pretty bleak, but I think we should look at it with a sense of humor. And I think because things have a tendency to decay and decompose, that makes us be able to appreciate the things that shine. Maybe to oversimplify this, I think there are basically like 2 kinds of people. I mean, there are a lot more than 2 kinds of people, but for the sake of an example, I'd like to divide people into 2 kinds of people. People who will randomly throw this sign, do this for some reason, like, and people who don't. I'm on the side of people who don't, even though I just did it, so I don't really know what that would mean. On the one hand, I really, and I apologize if you're somebody who does this or has a relative who does this or a friend. I don't know, I associate it with like tanned, shirtless people with long shorts and sandals. On the one hand, I'm full of judgment towards people who do this thing. But on the other hand, I really wish I were one of those people. And I mean, I don't say that like super facetiously. I mean, there's a bit of derision in the comment, but I do feel I'd be kind of a lot happier than I am if I were just somebody who. But if you get a chance to really interact with these people, then you're like, okay, maybe the differences are not that much. What does this mean? But eventually things will decay. You'll fall in love with the same guy or girl, or somebody will lend money to someone and not pay them back, and shit hits the fan. I mean, you even see it in families that like they're just drawn apart by money, and you're like, what the fuck is up with this shit? So anyway, I do kind of have a point, and my point was today's reading. This is one of the novels. I spent a lot of time with this novel. I think I read it in like a year because I'm not the fastest of readers. I discussed earlier that I maybe would like to become a speed reader, but I don't know how effective it is with these kinds of books. The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, and I've actually read at least 5. He's a writer that Nietzsche so often quotes, and I think a lot of philosophers too, because he poses this question of like, oh, what is the role of, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly the question, but something like, what is the role of morality once God is dead? It's like, is everything, God is dead? He's brought up very often as this example of like man questioning the absence of God, or like this death of God moment. But in this book, I think the most memorable character for me was this Russian monk called Father Zosima. I'm not sure how you would pronounce that. It's interesting, with these novels that are so dense and it takes such a while to just kind of get used to the characters' names, because also like the way, I don't know, Russian patronyms or whatever, they're like changing the names of characters all the time, and you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And it just takes you 200 pages to be like, okay, I think I know who is who. What remained with me was more ambiance. It's not so much plot, which I find quite interesting for a book that I spend so much time with. But this happens a lot with a lot of books I read. Like I'll recall certain elements, certain things of mood, and this kind of compels me to go back to them. But there was this character, Father Zosima, which, I mean, he's an important character. He's obviously not, for me, he became kind of the main character. And he had this passage where he was speaking about religion. And for me, the thing that was super interesting, it was, I would say, one of maybe 3 key events in my life that made me look at religion in a more positive way, interesting enough. Because I mean, I grew up as kind of a fierce atheist. I mean, wasn't really fierce, but staunch atheist. I mean, I had to get into discussions with kids, and I mean, I grew up in Mexico, so it was like a Catholic country, and so I was always questioning people like, what is the importance of being baptized? Is this all bullshit? Even though I think my aunt on my dad's side, I think she secretly may have baptized me when my mom and dad had to go on a trip. So I think she saved me from eternal damnation or limbo. Maybe I should just try to find that passage and read it. It'll be a lot better that way. Excuse the little ambiance from upstairs. I'm quite enjoying it. Yeah, I mean, we're friends on Facebook, so I don't think she'll get this far in the video, so she probably won't see it, but I have no problems with this. She can do this all she wants. Well, maybe not all she wants, but I have no problem with this happening once or twice a day. I have this little inception moment here. It's my day off. I take 1 day off a week, but of course I'm working on the Reading with Robin episode that you are now watching, and I realized that a little bit of backstory is needed because I cut out like a 10-minute section of reading. So as I'm speaking about his youth, he was in a regiment in the army, and they were stationed at this town. Here he meets this high-class girl, which sounds kind of weird, this high society girl. And they have this flirtatious relationship, and the army has to leave for 2 months, and when he gets back, he finds this girl engaged to this other dude, has a higher ranking in society than he does. He's just consumed with rage and jealousy, and he's super pissed off at her because actually they had been engaged the whole time, and so he thought she was just playing with him in this kind of high society party that, you know, these things used to happen around, like everybody's there. He decides to publicly ridicule this guy on some event he was speaking about. They end up challenging each other to a duel, which will happen at a later time. And then at some point Zosima beats up his servants, like he's just like consumed with rage, and he beats him into a bloody pulp because he gives him 2 blows, but the guy's face is covered in blood, and he's feeling super guilty about that. There are a bunch of other things that's super interesting, like the psychological profile that Dostoevsky constructs of Zosima from this very decadent young man, and this transformation that we will jump into now. Look around you at the gifts of God, the clear sky, the pure air, the tender grass, the birds. Nature is beautiful and sinless, and only we are sinful and foolish, and we don't understand that life is heaven, for we have only to understand that, and it will at once be fulfilled in all its beauty. We shall embrace each other and weep. That's like such a Dostoevsky thing too. I love it. I would have said more, but I could not. My voice broke with the sweetness and youthful gladness of it, and there was such a bliss in my heart as I had never known before in my life. All that is rational and edifying, said my antagonist, and in any case, you are an original person. You may laugh, I said to him, laughing too, but afterwards you will approve of me. Oh, am I ready to approve of you now? Said he. Will you shake hands, for I believe you are genuinely sincere? No, I said, not now. Later on, when I have grown worthier and deserve your esteem. Then shake hands, and you will do well. We went home, my second upbraiding me all the way, while I kissed him. All my comrades heard of the affair, and at once gathered together to pass judgment on me the same day. He has disgraced the uniform, they said. Let him resign his commission. Some stood up for me. He faced the shot, they said. Yes, but he was afraid of his other shot and begged for forgiveness. If he had been afraid of being shot, he would have shot his own pistol first before asking forgiveness, while he flung it loaded into the forest. No, there's something else in this, something original. I enjoyed listening and looking at them. My dear friends and comrades, said I, don't worry about my resigning my commission, for I have done so already. I have sent in my papers this morning, and as soon as I get my discharge, I shall go into a monastery. It's with that object I am leaving the regiment. When I said this, every one of them burst out laughing. You should have told us that first. That explains everything. We can't judge a monk. They laughed and could not stop themselves. And not scornfully, but kindly and merrily. They all felt friendly to me at once, even those who had been sternest in their censure. And all the following month, before my discharge came, they could not make enough of me. Ah, you monk, they would say. And everyone said something kind to me. They began trying to dissuade me, even to pity me. What are you doing to yourself? No, they would say, he is a brave fellow. He faced fire and could have fired his own pistol too, but he had a dream the night before that he should become a monk. That's why he did it. This is the way we saw the wood, saw the wood, saw the wood. This is the way we saw the wood so early in the morning. I realized that I'd been reading for about an hour, so it was way too long for a video of this format. But anyway, I'm going to sum up a bit what was going on. Like Zosima, he basically had this duel with this high society guy who was engaged to this woman that he was in love with. Zosima had beaten up his servant in this rage, and he felt super guilty about this. And the morning before the duel, he went to see him and apologized, and this gave him this great revelation, this total change of heart. So he went from being like this debauched, devilish young man to this kind of mystic, compassionate... Well, he was going to become a monk, basically, is the thing, and lead this ascetic life. So when he got to the duel, he let the other guy fire first. Bullet just grazes his cheek, and then when it's his turn to shoot, he takes his gun and he says first something like, "Thank God no one was killed," and he throws his gun out into the woods. And then the next section of the book recounts how people in the town respond to him, and everybody's very fond of him now. But basically this leads to him meeting this older man who befriends him, and they have these kind of profound conversations. And I'm not sure if he's like the father of the brothers Karamazov. Might be a hint of this, but I don't know, it's been a long time, so I don't really remember that deal. I have that feeling. If we consider today's situation, if we just kind of extrapolate and look at it abstractly, just the words resonate greatly with what's going on today. So let's jump into that, and maybe I'll be done with this. Heaven, he went on, lies hidden within all of us. Here it lies hidden in me now, and if I will it, it will be revealed to me tomorrow and for all time. I looked at him. He was speaking with great emotion and gazing mysteriously at me, as if he were questioning me. And that we are all responsible to all for all, apart from our own sins. You were quite right in thinking that, and it is wonderful how you could comprehend it in all its significance at once. And in very truth, so soon as men understand that, the kingdom of heaven will be for them not a dream, but a living reality. And when, I cried out to him bitterly, when will that come to pass, and when will it ever come to pass? Is not it simply a dream of ours? You don't believe it, he said. You preach it and don't believe it yourself. Believe me, this dream, as you call it, will come to pass without doubt. It will come, but not now, for every process has its law. It's a spiritual, psychological process. To transform the world, to recreate it afresh, men must turn into another path psychologically, until you have become, really, in actual fact, a brother to everyone. Brotherhood will not come to pass. No sort of scientific teaching, no kind of common interest, will ever teach men to share property and privileges with equal consideration for all. Everyone will think his share too small, and they will be always envying, complaining, and attacking one another. You ask when it will come to pass? It will come to pass, but first we have to go through the period of isolation. Boom, Dostoevsky, pandemic. What do you mean by isolation? I asked him. Why, the isolation that prevails everywhere, above all in our age. It has not fully developed, it has not reached its limit yet, for everyone strives to keep his individuality as apart as possible, wishes to secure the greatest possible fullness of life for himself, but meantime all his efforts result not in attaining fullness of life, but self-destruction, for instead of self-realization, he ends by arriving at complete solitude. All mankind in our age have split up into units. They all keep apart, each in his own groove. Each one holds aloof, hides himself, and hides what he has from the rest, and he ends up by being repelled by others and repelling them. He heaps up riches by himself and thinks, how strong I am now and how secure. And in his madness, he does not understand that the more he heaps up, the more he sinks into self-destructive impotence. For he is accustomed to rely upon himself alone and to cut himself off from the whole. He has trained himself not to believe in the help of others, in men and in humanity, and only trembles for fear he should lose his money and the privileges that he has won for himself. Everywhere in these days, men have in their mockery ceased to understand that the true security is to be found in social solidarity rather than in isolated individual effort. But this terrible individualism must inevitably have an end, and all will suddenly understand how unnaturally they are separated from one another. It will be that spirit of the time, and people will marvel that they have sat so long in darkness without seeing the light. And then the sign of the Son of Man will be seen in the heavens. But until then, we must keep the banner flying, sometimes even if he has to do it alone and his conduct seems to be crazy. A man must set an example and so draw men's souls out of their solitude and spur them to some act of brotherly love, that the great idea may not die. Not mind a little bit blown with those resonances there. So basically today I just want to say, if you have not read Dostoevsky, you just need to fucking read Dostoevsky because he's pretty badass.